Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy 4th of July. In honor of Independence Day, I'm going to be talking about a very patriotic subject, Social Security. So, this is kind of a random topic to be talking about today, but it was something that has come up multiple times over some recent social media posts or whatever. So it's forced me to look into Social Security a little bit deeper than maybe I've looked into it in the past, and has allowed me to just pull out some more details that I think are worth sharing, that to me seem pretty obvious that they would point in this direction, but most people who don't ever take the time necessarily to just take a quick look at the program may not come to these same conclusions or even be aware of the current state of this program. So I wanted to talk about three general principles about Social Security and the state of that program, and make the case for, hey, I think this is obviously a horrible program that should be ended. And that doesn't mean, I guess what I'm saying is, it seems like we're in an airplane that is running out of gas. I'm not saying that we should just immediately do a nosedive and kamikaze straight into the ground and blow up everyone in the airplane. But I also don't think we should act like, oh, everything's okay, everything's going to be fine, and keep flying in an airplane that's going to run out of gas without making a plan for the crash landing. I think that if you're in a plane that's running out of gas, you should start to be looking at your radar, looking for, hey, are there any fields up ahead? Can we start to reduce our altitude? Can we let everyone know on the plane, hey guys, we're going to be running out of gas. Please fasten your seatbelts, etc., etc. So you're going to have to make a crash landing anyways, but do you do it in a smart, intelligent way that has the least amount of casualties possible? Or do you continue to act like everything's going to be okay and then just fall out of the sky with no good plan? So, all that being said, the three kind of general principles that I wanted to hit on in regards to Social Security are as follows. So the first is the current status of the program and the poor financial condition that it's in. The second is the overall structure of the program and why it was poorly structured to begin with. And then lastly, imagine a better future by highlighting how it's handicapping us in the present times, and highlight, if we were to lift that handicap, if we were to lift those shackles, what some better outcomes could or might be, or almost inevitably would be, if we were to remove those shackles. So the first point, the poor financial condition that it's in, and this is really crucial because, hey, if it wasn't in dire financial straits, well, then there'd really be nothing to highlight. There'd be no reason for concern. And even if it was a bad program, you'd have to say, hey, well, it's a bad program, but it's working, it's doing what it's supposed to do, and it's going to provide these benefits whether we like it or not. So why raise any alarm bells about it? Well, the reason to raise some alarm bells about it are because what the Social Security website shows, if you look at the tables of the funding in its reserve fund, as well as the income that it takes in from taxpayers and the payroll tax that it imposes, and line it up with the amount of benefits that it spends, the benefits it spends and to beneficiaries, retirees, and the like. If you equate those two things, there's a deficit. And if you look back, there's been a deficit since 2010. So for a little over a decade now, the program has been running a large deficit, which has been covered by the interest that the US Treasury has paid on the assets that the Social Security Reserve Fund has, right? So over the years, when they were running a surplus, they were able to, the Social Security Administration was able to save up a surplus of taxes that it collected and keep it in a fund that today amounts to about $2.9 trillion. Well, holding that fund, keeping those assets in reserve, was kicking off an amount of interest over the years. Well, once we started running a deficit in 2010, in order to cover that deficit and be able to deliver on the benefits that were promised to retirees, the administration, the federal government, had to start to use the interest off of the reserve fund to cover the deficit. So for the last 10, 11 years, we've been using we've been using interest funds to cover the deficit. Well, that's all about to change because as what is it? The responsibility of providing these benefits has grown over the years, and the revenues have not kept up to meet that demand. Well, as of this coming year, the scale is going to tip into the other direction, where the interest on the amount in the fund is no longer going to be enough to cover the deficit, right? And so that means that we're going to have to dip into the principal of that reserve fund. And as anyone knows, when you start to dip into the principal, with any other retirement nest egg, once you cross over that threshold, right, the idea for most retirees, if they were to do private investing, would be to be able to live off of the interest of their investments so that they never have to dip into the principal, so that it can sustain them until they pass away. Well, that's not about to happen with the reserve fund of Social Security, right? So we're going to start dipping into and chipping away and cooking the goose that's laying the golden egg of those interest payments, and start to chip away at that 2.9 trillion. And right there on the front page of the financing tab of the Social Security Administration, it predicts that we will spend those funds down by 2035. Some articles are saying, hey, this could happen a whole lot sooner, but at the latest, the federal government has published, hey, by 2035, we will have spent those reserve funds. So what happens then? Well, so now we have, again, taxpayers who are paying the payroll Social Security tax now. Those tax dollars are going directly to the retirees who are retired now. So it's a pay-as-you-go system. So that's happening, but even that is not enough to cover the benefits that have been promised to these people. So we were relying on the interest on the funds that were in reserve. Well, as of this year, we're going to start to dip into that principal of those funds, and in 2035, we will have spent down those funds. So what happens then? Well, there'll be no more money left. So likely the only alternatives that the government would have would be either to lower the amount of benefits that are promised to individuals through Social Security, or they will maintain the current commitment, but then they'll have to pay for it through higher taxes. And as we, and a sub couple of bullets of that are that it may not be outright and more explicit taxes, as my guy Peter Schiff points out. There's three ways to tax the public. There's a current tax that's an explicit one. Hey, we're going to raise the payroll tax from what it currently is. We're going to add a couple more percentage points to cover the benefits to the current retirees. But there's also, the government can borrow from itself and kick the can down the road, or it can print more money, create more inflation, and diminish the value of the dollar in order to cover those commitments. So either way, we're heading towards a dead end that it's bad outcomes any which way you look at it. And so that is kind of point A on, hey, this thing is poorly financed. It's in a poor financial position, so something's got to change. To take a quick step back, because I think the natural reaction to that would be, okay, great, let's tweak the financing, let's tweak the system a little bit. And, this is a great program. We don't want to end this great program that so many people rely on for their livelihoods. Well, not so simple. It's actually been a poorly structured program from the start, but it's just been packaged in a really great way. It's received pristine marketing from the government to the American people to get this passed, right under their nose as, a good thing, and it's grown to be this behemoth of a program, when all along, and people early on, there's been a lot of resistance to it. But as government programs go, it gains this momentum and it gets this really expert level packaging. Hey, it's the federal government is going to be taking care of retirement. We don't want people to be in poverty in their old age. Well, the program from its start has been a Frankenstein of two bad parts put together that have, as a whole, for whatever reason, passed the sniff test of the American people. And this is totally stolen from Milton Friedman's ideology, or the words that he's put out on the subject, but it has one part which is a benefit system that's distributed in a totally arbitrary way. If you go on the Social Security's website and look up the formula and the way that the benefits are doled out, there's no actuarial relationship like there would be in a pension or in an investment or anything along those lines between what you pay into it and the benefits that you receive upon retirement. It's a very convoluted, complex system that has a very thin correlation between what you've actually paid into it and then what you're getting paid out in retirement. So that on its head would be a cause for suspicion. If that alone was marketed to the American people, we'd go, well, why would we want this kind of arbitrary, random, really convoluted benefit system? That doesn't really make sense. And then on the other hand, you have this tax that's a payroll tax on work up to a maximum. So it's a tax on low income people. And then in many cases, the people who make it to retirement and who benefit from this program, most older people on the average are wealthier, if they've lived long enough to collect Social Security. So now you have low income young people paying for the retirement of, on average, wealthier older people, right? So these two parts would never pass the sniff test, but put together, for whatever reason, it was allowed to slip through the cracks, and now it's something that we've had to live with for a long time. So I point that out to mean the solution would not be to fix a broken system. This is one of those scenarios where it's been broken from the start, and now it's just coming to fruition that, hey, it proved or it will prove to be just as bad as some people have predicted. And so the solution is not to try and fix it or to try and take something bad and make it better. The solution is going to be to close it, to end the program, and allow the free market to take over and flourish in place of this federal retirement system. And so now the last point, so we've talked about, hey, the poor financial condition that it's in, the poor structure that it has, that was created from the start, and how it's not really in a position to be fixed. So third, I just want to talk about the solution to it, and that closing it. A lot of people's reaction is, well, there's people that have paid into it, people that rely on it, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there's different schemes out there on how you could make this crash landing. And again, there will be a tightening of the belt, no doubt, right? Anytime you've gone in the wrong direction for so long, if you have to turn around and change course, there's going to be some extra work involved. There's going to be some pain involved, but that doesn't mean you should keep going in the wrong direction. And so there's a couple of there's schemes on how to unwind ourselves from this mess that we've gotten in. And the only one I'll mention, it's the only one I've really heard put in a plain way that makes a little bit of sense to me, would be just to issue government bonds for anyone who's paid into it, who's accrued any level of benefit. You get issued a government bond for that amount, or for what that amount would be upon retirement, and then you close down the system as a whole, right? So if the federal government has promised you any amount of money, you've been paying into it, so as not to pull the rug out from under you and to not change the rules of the game midstream, boom, you get this government bond. You will get the money that you've been promised, but we are not going to keep funneling people into the system, right? The first step in any crisis is to stop the bleeding, right? When you're triaging a scenario, the first thing you have to do is to stop the bleeding. So the very first thing we want to do, like today, like yesterday, or at the very latest tomorrow, is to not have any more people entering into this system. So that no more people start to accrue a liability to the federal government that the federal government owes the money, right? So sure, if you've accrued a benefit up to this point, boom, you get a government bond, you're going to get paid, you're going to get the money you promised. But anyone else who hasn't walked through that door yet, you will not be forced to go into this relationship with the government where you're paying them part of your income in hopes that they're going to be able to fund some of your retirement when you reach that age. And so there's a scheme to make the crash landing, but then the other kind of aspect to the scheme, because then people go, oh, what would we do? This program's not in place. Well, I just want to pause for a moment and point out one of the most insane aspects of this program as a whole is the fact that it is a 12% tax on your income. I don't think most people realize that there is a 12% tax on your income to fund this program. So ignore all the other details and just imagine today if you and everyone you knew had a 12% higher income, wherever you are in the spectrum between $0 and $140,000 a year, if you had 12% more of your income every year, do you think that you, your family, and your community would be in a better position to, in the first case, take care of yourself and save and invest for retirement? And then in the worst case scenarios that people bring up, because inevitably that's what they'll bring up. Well, what about the 1 in 100 people that is irresponsible or incapable of saving for retirement? Well, what are we going to do with them? Well, again, imagine if you and everyone you knew had 12% more of your income every single year, you would be in a much better position to fund charities that would take care of these people, lend a hand to family members, allow family members to move in with you because, again, your income has grown by 12%. And that's the point that I don't think could be highlighted enough. The way it's packaged, again, it's this expert level marketing / propaganda from the federal government where it's, oh, no, it's a 6 point something percent tax on your wages, and then your employer pays the other 6%, right? So it's your employer is paying that part of the tax. But as any economist will point out, and Peter Schiff does a great job of this, and at being in small business, I can definitely confirm this, that 6% is not being paid by your employer. It's being paid by you. And by the fact that it's in place, it is proof that your labor is worth that amount, that your employer can afford that amount. And so if the tax were taken away, they would be able to, rather than, and like we do in our small business, before we cut you a check, we calculate 6% of your wage and we send it to the federal government. Well, if we were to take away that tax, we'd be able to send that right to you, and you'd also get to keep the 6% that you send off the federal government. So that's something that's been studied. That's just a fact of the matter, that is not 6% coming out of your paycheck. It's in all reality 12%, because if your employer didn't have to send it to the government, they would have it left over to send to you, right? And so, because that's really what they can afford for the wage in exchange for your labor. If that weren't the case, they would have to lower your wage to the point that they could afford it, and then that additional 6% again is something that would get sent to the government, but ultimately it's part of the cost of employing you. So whether as an employer, it doesn't make much difference to them on whether they send that money to you or send that money to the federal government. That's the total cost of what it is to employ you. And so when the government gets out of the way, when there's less red tape, there's less employment laws, there's less regulations in the way that make it more expensive to employ you, when those costs are going to LNI, to the Family Medical Leave Act, when those just start to get chipped away at, that's coming out of your paycheck. the employer has to calculate that in on the cost of your labor. And if those things went away, that would go back into your compensation. So again, in summary, this is just a quick and dirty video on Social Security, the issues, the poor state of financing that it's in, the bad structure that it was in to begin with, and what life could be like if that tax were to go away. Again, that is a life-changing amount of money for many people. 12% of your income, if you make $50,000 a year, is $6,000, right? What could you do to put yourself in a better position in life with $6,000 a year if you're at that income bracket? So just wanted to make this as a highlight, little quick and dirty overview. And it's not something I've gone way into the weeds on and that I'm, an expert in Social Security. I may have missed a couple of details here or there, but I just think it's something that we all take for granted now because the system's been in place for so long. But in reality, just like with all these government programs and all this government regulation, this is what's stagnating our society and our economy and all these things. And that at each and every turn, if we were to just look at, hey, how can we limit government? How can we pull back the red tape and give people back their individual freedom and individual liberty? We would all be better off for it. And we would, again, start to see the prosperity and the rapid progress in society that created this great foundation that we experienced. So anyhow, hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I got anything wrong or if you have any questions about anything I said. And all that being said, thanks for checking out the video, and hope to, cover any other topics that are maybe interesting to people or that seem to be things we just take for granted, but that are really, insidious little programs that the government has slipped right under our noses. So all that being said, hope you're all having a happy 4th and a prosperous summer, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks.